Hey, gorgeous. Welcome to Season 2 of the Hormone P.U.Z.Z.L.E Podcast. I'm your host, Coach Kayla Smith, CEO of the Hormone P.U.Z.L.E Society, a women's health hub for fertility, hormones, and the business of coaching, creator of the Hormone P.U.Z.L.E method, an infertility warrior, two-time boy mom, and women's health expert. This podcast is for women struggling with infertility, painful periods, terrible PMS, or really just any symptom of hormone imbalance that they are ready to eliminate for good. Tune in weekly as we interview amazing experts in the fields of women's health, breaking down those hormone walls, nerding out on nutrition, and having way too much fun. Whether you're beginning your journey or you've been struggling for years, we're going to finally help you put those pieces of your hormone puzzle back together so that you can get pregnant and eliminate those pesky symptoms for good. Are you ready? This season is packed with even more expert guests sharing groundbreaking knowledge, giving you that jolt of energy that you so desperately need, sending you lots of virtual hugs, and inspiring you to take your fertility into your own hands and make that baby. Thank you so much for tuning in. Now let's get started on your road to transformation. Today's guest is Lisa Hendrickson-Jack, who is a certified fertility awareness educator and holistic reproductive health practitioner who teaches women to chart their cycles for natural birth control, conception, and monitoring overall health. In her new book, The Fifth Vital Sign, Lisa debunks the myth that regular ovulation is only important when you want children by recognizing the menstrual cycle as a fifth vital sign. Drawing heavily from the current scientific literature, Lisa presents an evidence-based approach to fertility awareness and menstrual cycle optimization. She hosts the Fertility Friday Podcast, a weekly radio show devoted to helping women connect to their fifth vital sign by uncovering the connection between menstrual cycle health, fertility, and overall health. Make sure you stay till the end to hear a word from our sponsor, OvaMoon. OvaMoon is a cycle balancing multivitamin. Now let's welcome Lisa to the show. Please stay till the end of our show to receive a free gift from our sponsor, OvaMoon, and to learn more about this amazing product. Hey Lisa, thanks for joining us. Welcome to the show.
Well, thanks for having me.
I am so excited to talk to you. So tell us a little bit more, kind of who you are and how you started working in women's health.
For sure. So, my journey started pretty early on. My first period was painful. And so, and they were really heavy. And so I ended up going to my doctor, not really knowing what to do, but wanting the pill because that's all I really knew at that point.
Right.
And so fortunately, I barely had to say anything. And he already put me, he was already writing my prescription before he finished. Right. Fortunately or unfortunately, I guess. But, so, from early on though, because I wasn't actually put on the pill for birth control, it was kind of like magical. So I thought I was fixed. So I would come off of it every now and then, because I was fixed, but then my periods would come back worse than they were before. Mm-hmm. So even though I didn't have the words to describe it, I did have a sense that whatever it was doing wasn't actually fixing it because I actually had come off of it several times and obviously wasn't.
Right.
So, in my family as well, I saw some of the women, including my mother, struggle with some fertility stuff. Like she had really painful, or her periods actually weren't painful, but they were extremely heavy, and she had fibroids, and then she ended up having a hysterectomy. So there was, and so did my aunt and like my cousin. And so there were all of these kind of, and it's more common in Black women as well. So the stats saying all of that. So I just had all of these things happen around me, and so I didn't really know how I was going to solve this problem, but I had the sense that, okay, my periods shouldn't be like this. I don't think that I don't really know how to fix it, but I also knew I wanted to have kids someday, not when I was like 18, but someday.
Right.
So what I ended up doing was when I actually became sexually active, I came off birth control and I was just going to use condoms. And it was right around then that I discovered fertility awareness. So, long story short, I started charting. I ended up kind of working with a group of women who were teaching. I took a training class in my early 20s, and I kind of like ended up doing what I was doing now. But what I can say is at the time, I didn't think that I could actually do this for a living. And so after I had my first son, and I realized I had been able to take for granted this knowledge for my whole 20s and my late teens, and I realized how many women were struggling with fertility issues, and still the average woman doesn't really know how her cycle works.
Right.
That's kind of what led me to start the podcast and write the book and all that kind of stuff.
Oh, I love that. And I love that you are talking about this. I always say I want to go back to like 7th grade and teach a class on our cycles and charting and, how to prevent pregnancy without using the pill and all of it. So I love that you're talking about this. And I love that you say that, our period is our 5th vital sign, and that's actually what your book is called. So let's talk about that. What does that mean?
Well, I mean, it's such an interesting concept. I certainly didn't create it. There are plenty of doctors that have been kind of putting information like this out there. So it's becoming more and more kind of widely understood that we should look at the menstrual cycle as a vital sign in women. And so for teenagers, for adolescents, it's a good thing for doctors to know so that they're asking about it. So if your 16-year-old daughter hasn't started menstruating yet, or if her cycles haven't, mostly normalized, these are things that we should be looking at, because certainly it can be a sign of a greater issue. So the most common vital signs that we're aware of, things like our temperature and our, blood pressure and our heart rate, things like that. We all have a sense that if you go to a doctor and if they were to test those things, not only do they have a general accepted range of what is normal, but if your blood pressure is too high, it also tells us, the doctor would know what could make the blood pressure too high. So they have a roadmap of what to look for. And so with the menstrual cycle, it works in much the same way. There is a normal range of not just the length, but what your periods are like, cervical fluid patterns, when ovulation is happening in the cycle, how long the second half of the cycle is between ovulation and your next period. And so someone who's trained in interpreting those signs can not only, understand that, okay, something's wrong, but depending on which part of the menstrual cycle is out of alignment, it can lead us not necessarily to a diagnosis, but to a short list, essentially, of what could be contributing to those problems. And so for me, given that I've done this for a long time, it's kind of like, well, obviously.
Right? Me too. I'll be like, hello.
But the challenge is that this is not necessarily how most, classically trained physicians go, this is not part of the training. So that's why it's necessary for people like me and people like you to be drawing attention to this.
I love that. I love that. And so you talk about living in sync with your cycle. So talk to us about how to do that.
Well, that's a pretty loaded question. I feel like
yes, I know.
Talk the rest of the podcast about
right.
that. But I love the question. I think what I'm realizing now is that because there's a lot of practitioners that are talking about it, and it's very trendy. And I'm realizing now that because of everything is around the menstrual cycle when I'm working with clients and things like that, it's kind of something that naturally comes to mind. So I think to answer the question in the most basic sense, when you start charting your cycles, you start to understand that it's not like your cycle isn't your period. So it's not just like your period, fast forward, and then another period. So if I take you through a menstrual cycle, the first day of your cycle is the first day of your period, the first day of your true flow. So some women may find that they have spotting or something like that before their period starts, but we would consider that part of the previous cycle. So then the phases of the menstrual cycle, essentially we have that menstrual phase, so the bleeding phase, and then you enter into your pre-ovulatory. So we can take the cycle divided in half, everything that happens before ovulation and everything that happens after. So in that pre-ovulatory phase, your follicles are developing, eggs and working towards ovulation, they're releasing a lot of estrogen, and that estrogen is associated kind of with energy. You can use the metaphor of spring, everything's blossoming, and this is what's literally happening. The ovary is developing and getting ready to blossom, essentially. So from, an energy perspective, a lot of women, not all, but a lot of women find that they have more creative energy. Maybe they feel a little bit more outgoing. Maybe if they're exercisers, they tend to feel really great exercising during this time. And so, there's a lot of things you can do to kind of tweak your work life situation to accommodate that. So then once we get to ovulation, once we ovulate and release the egg, our ovaries start to produce progesterone. And so we enter into the second half. We enter into the post-ovulatory phase, or the luteal phase. And so if we were to go with like the metaphor, so I mentioned spring is kind of like the follicular phase. Ovulation is like summer, so that fertile window. And then after ovulation, it's kind of like that fall, autumn, where a lot of us will recognize if we're going to feel kind of down or kind of off. I just had a conversation with a few clients that were talking about, teariness and like those PMS symptoms, the blues. That is typically in that post-ovulatory phase as we approach menstruation, which would then be the winter. So with that kind of broad category in mind, there's a lot of ways we can live in sync with the cycle. One of the most, I suppose, basic things we could do is start to pay attention to how we feel at different times of the cycle. So I've had to learn, I'm still not even necessarily the best at scheduling things at appropriate times. I know there's times when I end up having to do something on the first day of my period, and I'm like, why did this happen? But that's something that we can do, accommodate our work schedule accordingly to our energy. And so this, again, is very personal. Some women may be fine to do different things at different times of their cycles, where some of us actually don't want to do anything during our period. We don't want to have to do any kind of front facing work. So, as, an entrepreneur, as, if you, whether you have a job, whether you work for someone else or whether you work for yourself, if you have the ability to kind of work on some of those like front facing things when you feel really great, you're in the pre-ovulatory phase. And then, so those are some of the basic things. And I mean, you can take it as far as you want to. So you can organize your exercise routines on a monthly basis instead of a weekly basis. So we live our world in a very male-centered environment where it's kind of like we have these goals on a day-to-day basis and every day is the same. When you have a cycle, every day is not the same. And so it's okay to think of things in terms of a month and actually really stack some of those workouts for the phase of your cycle where you actually have more energy and give yourself a bit more leeway, leading up to your period and on the days of your period. I had a conversation with a client a couple of months ago, and I was like, you don't have to like do a hard workout when you're actively bleeding. And she was kind of, because she was like so in the zone and the mindset, and she was like, oh, it's like I gave her permission to like, you don't need to like, if you looked at a month, just give yourself an extra workout around ovulation. Like, what are we talking about here?
Right. I know. And I feel like sometimes that's all we need is just that permission to be like, oh, I don't have to work out this hard to be fit. Okay. Yeah. I love that.
Well, and one thing I'll just add to that, since you asked, because like I said, I could go on about this forever.
Yes.
But some of the things that, trouble us, like so many women have pain with their periods. Obviously, it's a very common issue. And so one of the ways that you can kind of sync with your cycle, just by acknowledging that there are different times when you may have different energy and kind of, peeling it back when when you're in that premenstrual phase, if your energy isn't where it needs to be. So that even can be helpful. But, a lot of women are taking different supplements and, different approaches. And so there are ways to actually tailor that stuff to your period. So for example, I'm just throwing this out as an example, but like, for example, magnesium is a really common way to support to reduce inflammation and to support PMS symptoms. And we may not actually think to tailor it to the cycle. So there's certainly value to do magnesium throughout the cycle if you struggle with PMS symptoms and things like that. But, it's also valuable to consider, it's the post-ovulatory phase if we're going to have these issues.
Right.
It's the post-ovulatory phase that we need that progesterone support. So it actually does make sense in some of these cases to tailor some of our approaches based on where we are in the cycle.
Oh, I love that. I love that. We talk about cycle syncing here a lot. And so it's a really popular topic. So I love that we're talking about it now. And so talk to me a little bit about what if somebody's not having a cycle, or maybe they're in menopause, or they have irregular periods. How do you recommend that they cycle sync?
Well, so do you mean someone who is supposed to be cycling
Yes.
who is not, or someone
Yes.
who's okay?
Well, let's take it from both angles. So somebody that's supposed to be cycling and they're not. So what would you say with that one?
Well, I mean, first of all, you have to kind of figure out what's going on. So it goes back to the concept of the menstrual cycle as a vital sign. So if you're a woman of reproductive age, then a healthy menstrual cycle is a sign of health. And if you don't have a period, it's a sign of a problem. So to give an example, maybe one of the most common examples is HA, hypothalamic amenorrhea, which is categorized by undereating, overexercise, and stress. And so if you're in a situation like that where you don't have a period, so you're not ovulating or menstruating for a period of 6 months or more, I want my notifications, but if you have a period of 6 months or more when you have not ovulated or had a period, then that can actually be associated, especially if it continues, with a greater lifetime risk of osteoporosis. And, you know, I've never met a 21-year-old that wants osteoporosis, but I have actually met 30-year-olds who had that diagnosis because of prolonged HA. So the first thing would just be to establish, that it's not okay, and what is actually going on. So I think that it's really, really common for women to overexercise and undereat. It doesn't always result in the complete loss of their period. But, you know, the way that I often talk about it with clients is that, so stereotypically speaking, when men exercise, they're trying to bulk up. Like, this is the goal. So
right.
Like, you know, typically speaking, I know everyone doesn't fall into this category, but men typically want to bulk up. So they, you know, work out a ton, and then they like eat more protein, eat more meals. Right. Like, they're doing the thing to bulk up the muscles. But women, stereotypically, we tend to want to lean up. Mm-hmm. So then we do all the exercise and literally eat no more food. So right. I think, so there's crazy. There's a lot of really basic things that we need to look at, you know, before we start to like, oh my goodness, is there a, you know, some sort of rare, you know, genetic disorder? Like, well, let's see if she's having 3 meals a day. Let's see how much protein she's having. Let's see how much she's exercising. And between those things, I think for most women who've lost their period, we should find something that she could improve. We should also be looking at her stress level, because stress by itself can even do something like that. So, so certainly that would be the first place to look. And the other thing that's important to know is that not always, but often, when women go to their doctors, if they've lost their periods, they're put on birth control. And it's really important to know that birth control can, in some cases, make you bleed on a regular schedule, so giving you the withdrawal bleed. Some cases it doesn't. So if the HA is well advanced, the bleeding may not even happen with the birth control pill. But either way, that's not solving the problem. And so even though they often do it because there's some studies that show that it may slow the bone loss, but slowing the bone loss isn't stopping the bone loss, and right. You need to eat. So
exactly. And I love that I love that you say that, you know, kind of look at how much are you eating? Are you eating enough? Because our body, as we know, needs food to make the hormones we need to give us our cycles. So it all kind of comes full circle. So I love that. So let's talk a little bit about myths. What are some myths you hear around period health?
Where to start?
Maybe just like 1 or 2 things you hear a lot.
Well, I mean, I'm trying to think myths related to period health specifically. I think some of the things, like even just thinking that your cycle is your period. So sometimes I'll ask my clients, like, you know, tell me about your cycle, and then they'll tell me about their period. And
right.
So a lot of us don't really know a whole lot about even just the basics, even just knowing that we consider the first day of your cycle the first day of full flow, things like that. So there's a lot of basic information that we don't have. Obviously, some of the most common myths about the cycle is that, you know, ovulation always happens on day 14, and the cycle is always 28 days. And so those are myths. because even women with really regular cycles, so, I do have a fair number of clients whose cycles are pretty regular, like they average around 29 days, but averaging around 29 days does not make you a robot. And it doesn't mean that every cycle is exactly the same. And so it's really important to recognize that. So since I teach fertility awareness, some of my clients are trying to avoid pregnancy. Some are trying to get pregnant. And if you have in your mindset that you always ovulate on day 14 and you think you're a robot, then what can happen is if you have a cycle where you ovulate earlier, even if you're trying to get pregnant, you can not get pregnant because it's too early. I never ovulate that early. And obviously you could get pregnant if you time it wrong, if you're trying to avoid. So just having that general understanding, I would say, is helpful and important. And along those lines, fertility clients in particular are often told like, well, just have sex every other day or have sex from day this to day that of the cycle if they're trying to have a baby. And cycle length can vary widely depending on the situation. Many women have irregular cycles, delayed ovulation. Many women have taken the pill for a long time and maybe, just recently come off of it. And so they may have all kinds of cycle irregularities. So certainly, there's a lot. I think that's probably a good summary of some of the myths. You can ask me more questions if you want.
Yes, no, that's perfect. Let's debunk some of those main ones. And those are some that I've heard before, but definitely they're out there. And so I'm glad we're talking about that to kind of debunk those, like I said. So I love it. Well, awesome. We're going to take a short break. We're going to hear a word from our sponsors. When we come back, we're going to talk more practical tips around period health and around fertility awareness. So we'll be right back.
Hey y'all, it's Coach Kayla here. I hope you are loving this episode as much as I am. We will be back in just a minute, but first, a word from our sponsors. Today's sponsor is OvaMoon, the first ever menstrual cycle and hormone balancing multivitamin. It's a formula made by women, backed by naturopaths and herbalists, and packaged with tons of high quality and bioavailable vitamins, minerals, and herbs. Say goodbye to PMS symptoms like cramps, bloating, hormonal acne, and give your body the nutrients it needs to thrive. Check them out at www.ovamoon.com and use the code PUZZLE15 in all caps to get 15% off your first order. Hey, Lisa, welcome back to the show.
Well, thanks.
Yes. So let's talk a little bit of practical tips. What are some, maybe 3 things that we can be thinking about if we want to start doing fertility awareness or cycle awareness?
Well, I would say the first thing is pretty simple, just to start tracking your periods. I think that's something that, especially around me being the fertility awareness person, it's kind of like I only track my periods.
Right.
So I think there's a lot of value in just jumping in and starting somewhere. So, I do recommend if you're, finding a charting app, find one that will allow you to turn off the prediction settings, especially if you do want to learn fertility awareness at some point. So at least you have the option, because it can kind of throw you off, especially because sometimes the predictions are wrong.
Right.
But I would say one place to start is literally just starting to track your periods, note them in the app. That's a good kind of segue into doing it. And then another thing you can do is just start paying attention to your cervical fluid. So you don't necessarily have to be going, this is just kind of if you're wanting to get your feet wet, but when you go to the bathroom, we all go to the bathroom several times a day. You can just start to pay attention, as you wipe yourself, is there anything there? Do you see anything on your underwear? And depending on the situation, if you're not currently on hormonal birth control, if you are cycling naturally, then at some point you would very likely see that there is a part of your cycle where you're going to see cervical fluid that should coincide with ovulation. And once you get a hang of that, you can start to predict your period, because once you've confirmed ovulation, in a typical healthy cycle, your period will come about 12 to 14 days after pretty consistently. And then for those who really want to dive in, and actually start charting or just want to learn more about it, I'd certainly recommend to start reading about it. So of course I wrote a book, so I'll mention
yes,
the vital side. Taking Charge of Your Fertility by Toni Weschler is one of the top resources, obviously, that many women learn from. So certainly just jumping in and starting to learn is a really great first step.
I love that. And I love your book. It is so wonderfully written. So thank you. Definitely anybody listening, get her book, Fifth Vital Sign. We'll put it in the show notes. I love it. So talk to me. Do you have any favorite supplements for period health or for just, women's health in general?
I actually had a thought of like, should I answer it kind of snarky and say protein or
right? Is that a supplement? Yes.
So, I mean, I did throw out magnesium, in the previous segment, for an example, because I thought it was a great way to demonstrate how you could target specifically through the cycle. But my approach, is typically to address the foundational factors first. I find that especially with the big it's very popular, this whole conversation about menstrual cycles. And it is amazing because when I first started learning about this stuff 20 years ago, there was no conversation. There was no social media. Like, I'm old, but
me too.
Exactly. I mean, it was just different back then. But so it's a blessing. But what I find is that many of us are wanting that magical supplement, that thing that's going to make our cycles work. And there are certain supplements that are very popular that people really like that would be their favorite supplement. So I hesitate to provide something like that because it doesn't matter if I have a favorite supplement. That is not necessarily what you need. And often what I find with my clients is that what they need is the things that we all kind of know that we should be doing, but we're all very busy. I have never met anyone who isn't busy. Have you met anyone?
No.
No, we're all busy, like all of us. And so what that means, like, let me break down what busy means. Busy means many of us are not having breakfast. Many of us are skipping meals. Many of us are exercising and not eating additional calories to compensate for that. Many of us are going to bed late, not getting good sleep. And so a lot of us have all of these different things that we're not taking care of. And so then we start charting our cycles and it's like a mystery. Like, why is my cycle not normal? And then it's like someone says something about magnesium or someone says something about a magical supplement. And certainly supplements can, of course, help and improve. But from my experience, I would say that you really want to address those foundational factors first. You would be amazed at how impactful the shifts you can see in the menstrual cycle by literally eating enough food, sleeping in the dark, making sure, like, just doing the basic things that we all know, doing some stress management. So literally, like, my favorite supplement would probably be protein, which
I love it. I love it. And I love that too, that you pretty much just went through all the pieces of the hormone puzzle method. It's like, that's exactly what this show is about. Right?
So I'll share something with you about charting that I love. Charting is the foundation of charting is like in reality. So I'm being a little flippant, but quite literally, if you chart your menstrual cycle, so I'll give you a very common example. So I'm sure that this is something that comes up all the time for you as well. If you're charting your menstrual cycle, and so a healthy cycle, it's supposed to be 24 to 35 days. You're supposed to have your period, and then, you're supposed to approach ovulation, have about 2 to 7 days of cervical fluid before you ovulate, and then you're supposed to ovulate. And then after ovulation, you're supposed to get your period about 12 to 14 days later. And during that about 2-week period, you're not supposed to have a ton of cervical fluid because it's supposed to be dry. And you're not supposed to have all this bleeding because it's supposed to be dry. So in a very common example, you may have several days of bleeding before your period. So again, we may be tempted to I need Vitex, I need this, I need that. But if you do a full assessment, with this person that you're talking to, you may find that they go to bed at 2:00 every morning. You may find that they have coffee for breakfast, and they only have 2 other meals in the day. And so before we jump to that magical supplement, you would be amazed at how, and this is, so when I say it's rooted in reality, it's like, it's not about what I think. It's about what is literally going to improve the cycle. So my opinions don't matter. Like I have all kinds of opinions.
Right.
If what I suggest to you doesn't cause the cycle to move, like my opinion,
right.
Yes. So that's why I'm sure that it reflects in the puzzle method, because when you do what works, like it works.
Right. Exactly. I love that answer. I love it. So let's talk a little bit about pseudoestrogens. How do those affect our cycle?
So when you say pseudoestrogen, I probably refer to those as xenoestrogens.
Yes.
Like you mean those kind of external.
Yes. Endocrine disruptors.
All the endocrine disruptors.
Yes.
So I mean, it's interesting because again, this is something that most of us are aware of to some extent, but I think we can severely underestimate the impact that they can have. So certainly this is kind of like a session that I do with my clients, and I've done a number of podcast episodes on it as well. And so it's kind of like, how deep do you want to go? Like,
right.
We can talk about all of the products ever made for women on the market, right? The ones that weren't necessarily, eco-friendly or however you want to say it. So basically all, whether we're talking about, body lotions, all of the things, everything that is made, anything with a scent, anything with perfume, anything, the raspberry straw, like all of it.
Right.
And then we can think about what we use in our house. So our cleaning products, again, anything with a scent, certainly if it has an essential oil or if it's a different natural product, that's a bit different, but ultimately anything with a scent. So all the cleaning products,
right.
Dishwashing detergent, your laundry soap, the dryer sheets,
the dryer sheets
and the fabric softener. And then it's like, again, how deep do you want to go? Like
right.
We could talk about off-gassing of carpets. We could talk about off-gassing of mattresses. We could talk about the things in the water, because many people are on things like antidepressants and birth control pills, and they pee, and then that stuff can circulate back in the water. There's a lot of things and then and so I think it can be overwhelming to really think about it. And so what I always say to my clients is that, there's no, the goal isn't to be perfectly pristine and clean, because even if you get everything sorted out in your house, you still have to walk outside and breathe air. So This isn't about, perfection. I always say it's about improvement. So you can significantly reduce your exposure just by, first of all, being aware of where it's all coming from,
right.
Just by switching the type of body lotion you use or getting rid of the fabric softener, the toxic one, because you lay in your sheets all night, every night. Right. So, and it doesn't always have to be really expensive. So one of the things that I've done personally, and a lot of my clients have done as well, is you don't necessarily have to buy the super expensive natural brand. Like your first step could just be going with non-scented.
Right.
Like free.
Yes.
And so you're still getting the same brands, but you're just getting way less toxic, stuff. And then you can kind of gradually do that. So it's a process. So for me, I started with a lot of the beauty products. The cleaning products were a bit of a challenge. Because for me, I did this process years ago. There was a time when the cleaning products, although natural, did not work. It seems like they've improved them. So they seem to work better now. But before it was I bought dishwasher soap and it didn't work. So I had to go back to the toxic stuff, and it took a couple of times. Yes. So I think fortunately we're in a time where there's a lot more awareness about this. But there were other things that took a bit longer. I didn't immediately get rid of all my pots and pans and buy, cast iron, but I have cast iron now. I didn't immediately buy the water filter with the fluoride filter on it, but now I have it. So I would say give yourself, depending on your level of type A-edness, 3 to 6 months or even up to a year to fully go through your whole house and look through this if this is something that you're really concerned about. Oh, and one more thing. The most common endocrine disruptor is the pill. And so it's getting an honorary mention because we don't think of it as an endocrine disruptor, but as much as we can rag on laundry detergent wasn't designed to stop you from ovulating.
Right.
Just saying.
Yep. Just saying. I love it.
There was something else I wanted to say, but now I forget what it is. So maybe I'll come back after.
Okay. And I love that you talk about, just start small. That's what I talk about. Just don't feel like you have to go and throw everything out that you use tomorrow, although some of us type A's would do that. But if you can make an improvement as you run out of products, just choose something that's cleaner. That's it. And funny story. So I had Laura Adler on the show recently. She's an environmental toxins nerd. And she was talking about how, so she's obviously super clean, non-toxic life. her neighbor was doing their laundry and their laundry vent went right into her window. So she was like, I was getting like toxins pumped into my house, and what do you do about that? But so it's funny that you say, walk outside and the air we breathe can be toxic, but we just do the best we can. That's it.
Well, so that reminded me of two things. One, I also have that experience. So whenever my neighbors are doing their laundry, I smell their fabric softener.
Oh.
And two, so I have a 5-year-old and an 8-year-old. And so when they were babies, you give clothes and you get clothes. So we got, and it was like, these clothes were like brand new, like high style fashion.
Yeah.
But it took me like 7, I'm not making this up, 7 times to wash them before that fabric softener smell, started to dissipate. So for anyone, I'm not trying to call you out or whatever, because I used to use fabric softener too. Like I am not beyond this world.
Right.
But when you use it, it's so funny, right? Because when you use it every time. And it's like you don't, like, because you're so used to these scents, you don't really smell them. So since we've gotten rid of like the scented lotions and like the scented stuff, now I can smell it. And so like I said, it took like 7 washes to get it out. And when I had used it, you would never have really noticed that.
Yeah, that's crazy.
Something to think about. And I remembered the thing. Pads and tampons. So that's something as well for women, particularly who have had like period pain or different issues. It's not the thing for everyone, but there are women who switch to organic pads and tampons, or they start using like a cup or something like that. And so they're not exposing themselves to those toxins anymore, who actually see improvements in their hormone patterns and periods.
For sure. I love that you're mentioning that, because I talk about that all the time. Tampons and pads, even if it's organic, it's still a foreign substance that's sprayed with pesticides that you're putting in your most delicate tissues. Like, no, thank you. I'm not doing that. So I'm a huge fan of the period cup or period panties. I'm like, just switch. It's fine. You will live. So I love that you say that. And definitely too, to go back to another point that you made, the pill, we don't think about that. We don't think about that being such a toxic thing. And it is. So let's talk about that a little bit. How can we get off the pill? Obviously fertility charting, but talk to us a little bit about that.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's complicated. I get some flack sometimes because I call out the pill. It's interesting. So in the book, I have 2 chapters on the pill, and it's like, if you're going to be upset at any point in time when you're reading my book, it's probably good when you're going to be reading about the chapters of the pill. And so I've actually had like medical professionals who've read my book be like, oh, I wish I could recommend it, but you're too negative about the pill. And I mean, fair enough, but I'd like to direct you to the 250 studies I say. Like, it wasn't like my opinion about the pill.
Right.
So I think that it's my goal isn't to isn't to say, okay, the pill is good or bad or whatever, but the goal is to allow women to have informed consent. So you can't really have informed consent if you don't really know what it's doing and what the side effects are. And so even just understanding how it works, I think, is really helpful. So to answer your question, it's like, when I was researching for that chapter, I got this book called The Fertility Doctor, and it goes through the history of the pill. And so the first pill was brought onto the market in 1960. It's called Enovid or something. And so before it officially came on the market, they did what I'm referring to as a beta trial. And so they had women, some of the women actually were trying to conceive. And so, and also women who potentially weren't. And so they put them on the pill, but in that first iteration, they didn't have a sugar pill week.
Right.
So these women were put on it just continuously. And so they stopped having their periods, and many of them became convinced that they were pregnant, because this was in the 50s and there was no situation other than pregnancy, breastfeeding, or a severe illness that caused you to stop bleeding. So literally they all thought they were pregnant. The doctors tried to convince them. It was hard for them. And so eventually the doctors no, it's the medication, et cetera, whatever. And so because some of the women had been trying to conceive, based on the idea that if we just stop the period for a while and then, it'll spontaneously cause you to be fertile. So I think that's probably why they were doing that. But some of these women were devastated because they actually,
I can imagine.
So out of that basically came what we have today, which is, if we think about the 28-day formulations, they could have chose any period of time. They could have chose 21 days, they could have chose 35 days, but they chose 28 because they wanted it to appear like a cycle. They wanted women to take it, to have their sugar pills, and to have a bleed. So to this day, most women think that they get to keep their period and get to have a regular period, and that the pill regulates their cycle and all this kind of stuff, when really the pill actually stops you from having a cycle. Mm-hmm. And then when you take your sugar pills, it's your body just reacting to the sudden drop in artificial hormones. So the withdrawal bleed is literally just like your body just, trying to get back to normal, resetting itself. So the three main modes of action are preventing ovulation, making the uterine lining thin. So the uterine lining, when you're taking hormonal contraceptives, is thin so that it would prevent implantation if somehow an egg was fertilized. And then also the pill causes your cervix to fill with a thick mucus plug. So, theoretically preventing the sperm from getting through the uterus at all. So even just that should, like, many women, as you know, don't even know that that's what it's doing.
Right.
And so, like, again, when you eat food that has been sprayed with pesticides, the pesticide was not designed to cause you to stop ovulating.
Right. Crazy. Oh, and I feel like too, nowadays there's so many great ways, like fertility awareness, like cycle charting, to prevent pregnancy, get pregnant, to get a regular cycle, if you will. So I feel like more and more people are being educated, and the pill is less and less used, which is good.
Well, I mean, it's a tricky one, because what I always say too is that, because people are sometimes surprised that I'm not like totally like, no one should ever, because that's not really the way that I look at it. Is that, first of all, different women are going to choose different things. So when many of us learn about the hormones and the artificial, like how it all works, there's a certain percentage of us that are like, no, like that's not for my body. There's a certain percentage of us who are going to say like, okay, I'm glad that I understand it, but it's still the best thing for me right now. But they might moderate their use. So instead of being on it for, say, 15 years, they may choose to be on it like in high school or in university when everything's just too crazy. But then at least they'll kind of modify that when they're in a more stable situation. And then there's other women who would use it for just as long, just like how people smoke cigarettes and like, you know what I mean? Like it's like, and I'm not trying to put it down, but I'm just trying to say, because I get like sometimes people on the other side being like, how could you ever say it's okay? And I say, well, as long as we know the risks associated, we need to be able to make those choices. Like, and so, but to your point, I say it's complicated because women are taught from a young age that they can get pregnant on any day of their cycle. And so the vast majority of us have this intense fear of an unplanned pregnancy because it's drilled into our heads that there are no safe days and no safe times. So when I was growing up, it was like, I feel like it was a bit different because I wasn't under the impression that I was either going to be on the pill or pregnant. So when I made the decision to, say, use condoms until I discovered fertility awareness, I was confident because I was taught that condoms were 98% effective and I knew how to use them correctly. But the average woman today, especially the younger kind of generation, like in the 20s, it seems like they have literally been taught that if you're not on the pill, it's just a moment of time before you get pregnant. And so they're not really feeling comfortable to trust a condom. Diaphragms are not promoted. And so, but there are a number of ways to successfully prevent pregnancy, and you can combine methods. Like you could use a diaphragm with safe spermicide with a condom, or like with withdrawal. And then and I'm not necessarily promoting it, but I acknowledge it because a lot of couples do use withdrawal, but they just don't talk about it, or they bring it up in a very like shameful, like kind of thing. So I just call it out because people, like, it's the real world we live in and people do use it. But the point is that if you use fertility awareness and you learn about your cycle and you understand your fertile window, then I feel like you have the opportunity to make those other methods more effective. You know the only point in your cycle when you could get pregnant, so it would encourage you to use those methods correctly at the time. So yeah, like I think the women who are really, really terrified of, pregnancy and feeling like the pill is the only option, it is really important to know that there are other methods that are non-hormonal that work.
I love that.
You have to learn how to use it. Like you have to take the time to learn how to do it.
Yes, I love it. And this is things that you teach in your programs, correct?
Yes. Yeah. It's my wheelhouse.
Yes. I love it. So talk to me about that. Where can people find you and how can they work with you?
Well, thank you for that. I mean, we talked about the book, The Fifth Vital Sign. It's available on Amazon. And if you go to thefifthvitalsignbook.com, you can get the first chapter for free. So that's kind of fun. So I have my podcast, Fertility Friday. I've been at it for, I think I'm in year 7 now. It's like,
wow,
that's time flies.
Yes, and it's wonderful. I love your podcast.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah.
Well, so if any of the listeners are really intrigued by our conversation here today, like it's a lot of content that is specific to fertility awareness and also fertility in general and things like that. And so that's a great place to find me. You can just type Fertility Friday in your favorite podcast player. I'm pretty active on Instagram most of the time, and so I post some interesting, fun things over there.
Yes.
And yeah, so I'd say those are the best places to find me.
I love it. And all that'll be in our show notes for sure. And so tell us, any final thoughts you have, any words of advice or, words of encouragement that you have for our audience?
Well, I mean, I think when it comes to fertility awareness, a lot of women are really attracted to it. You hear about it, it really intrigues you, and you just kind of like, I feel like it's just like you're kind of called to it, like not to make it so super fluffy. Some women end up using it because they like have no choice because it, they have a really bad reaction to birth control and they need something else. But I think, if you're listening to this and it really resonates with you, just, dive in, learn about it. You don't have to use the method right away. Like there's plenty of time to learn about it. And you can do a lot of that even if you're still on birth control. So if you're on birth control, you can still take some time to learn about it. I think a lot of women, I would say like when they're first discovering it, I've had a number of women who join my programs after a year or more of listening to the podcast because it just takes them that long to get comfortable with the idea. And that's totally normal. It's fine.
Right. I love it. Well, thank you so much for being here. It was an honor to talk to you. I really appreciate it. So thank you.
Thank you so much for having me.
All right. Thank you guys for listening. Until next time on the Hormone P.U.Z.Z.L.E Podcast. Bye for now. I hope you enjoyed our show. Please don't forget to check out our sponsor, OvaMoon, at ovamoon.com and use code PUZZLE15 at checkout for 15% off your order. Hey, hang on just 1 second before you go. I want to make sure that you are aware of all of the amazing free resources that I have for you on my website at CoachKayla.com. From a fertility meal plan, a cycle syncing quick start guide, a holistic healing cookbook, as well as master classes, blog posts by me and some amazing experts in the fields of fertility, hormones, and nutrition. So many wonderful resources that will help you on your journey. And I wish there had been something like this when I was going through my 2 years of infertility, but there just wasn't. And so that's why I decided to create all of this for you. So make sure that you go and check it out and you take advantage of this plethora of support that I have provided for you. And spoiler alert, these were some of the same tricks and the same foods that I used to get myself pregnant, not once, but twice, even after my doctors said that I couldn't. So I know that these things work. Make sure you take advantage of that. And I cannot wait for you to be my next success story. So thanks, love. See you soon. Thanks for tuning in today to the Hormone P.U.Z.Z.L.E Podcast. Check out the show notes for today's episode at CoachKayla.com. If you like what you hear, please subscribe and leave a review. Thanks for hanging out with me, and I'll see you next week.